So this vehicle is about remote communications for four-wheel drivers and overlanders, and in particular a really exciting new technology called Starlink, which I think is absolutely going to revolutionise the way that vehicle-based travellers communicate when they're away from main built-up areas. Now, it's a long video, so I'll split it into parts. I'm going to do an introduction here. I'm going to talk about why it actually needs remote communications, some of the options you've got for communications like messages and sat phones, etc. I'm going to explain how different satellite systems work, like LEO and geostationary, and of course Starlink itself. And then we're going to talk to Marcus Tuck, who is a real-world overlanding Starlink user, and he's going to explain his experiences. We're also going to take a lot of questions because this was part of a live webinar. And then at the end, I'm going to wrap up with pros and cons of different remote satellite systems. Now, I've put all of the links to these different parts in the description, so have a look at this video's description, jump to the part you want. Hope you enjoy it. Alright, so why do you want to communicate out of mobile range first and foremost? What are the reasons for that? Well, first one is emergency assistance. Whenever you go overlanding, four-wheel driving, travelling, whatever you want to call it, you should aim to be as self-reliant as you possibly can be, or within your group. However, there may come a time when you need help, and that's emergency assistance. Maybe your vehicle's rolled, on fire, or whatever the case may be, or maybe you've come across someone else who needs help, so that's an important reason. Then it's just keeping in touch. I mean, we all like to keep in touch. Even if we try to get away from the bush, you know, there might be someone back at home you want to keep checking in with for whatever reason, or they want to keep checking in with you, or there might be urgent news, who knows. Safety tracking, same sort of thing, so people can see where you are, or particularly if you're a solo traveller, that's important. And then also situation updates, fire and weather. So for example, to have a campfire in many places in Australia, you can only do that if that's not a fire ban day. So is it a fire ban day or not? You don't know. You've got to phone up and find out. So there's another reason to have remote communications. So to set the scene for Starlink and what it means for four-wheel drivers and overlanders, let's take a quick look at some of the remote communication options we've got at the moment. And at the end of this video, I'm going to run through the pros and the cons of them once we've seen Starlink. So you've obviously got the Satphone, which is a mobile telephone. It talks to satellites, and therefore you can get coverage and service in many places in the world where your normal mobile telephone won't work, but not necessarily everywhere in the world, depending on a network, not necessarily all the time. They do have limitations. You can text with them. Then we've got distress beacons over here. Now, commonly these are called EPIRBs, and an EPIRB is actually a marine distress beacon. The ELT is a aviation one. What four-wheel drivers and hikers use is PLB, or personal locator beacon. So you carry them around, and really no maintenance, no nothing, no ongoing plan. You press a button, someone will come and find you from the COSPAS SARSAT network, an international organisation. 43 or so governments have banded together to create that. So these are really good for distress, but there's no nuance there. It's just you're either in extreme emergency or you're not, one of the two. Then we've got messages over here, which are basically text-based devices there. You can, tiny little QWERTY keyboard or something like that, you can tap out your message, send them, they do tracking. And there's also multifunction devices like the Garmin Montana there, which combine that with navigation. And the Zolios here doesn't actually have its own unit. What it does is connect to a smartphone, and then you use your smartphone for the messaging, send it via the Zolios, and off it goes. So that's the way that one works. And then we've got smartphone hotspots here, and there's one from Iridium, the Iridium Go, and also from Thuraya. And then you use your smartphone to connect for voice and very slow data via specialist apps, usually, to the satellite network. Now then, all of these run on different networks. So we've got Globalstar, Thuraya, and then we've got Inmarsat, Iridium, and Starlink, which is what we're going to take a look at now. Now, there was one important myth which we really need to bust, and it is this: your mobile phone will not connect to satellites in the event of an emergency. I've heard this from Defence Force, I've heard it from paramedics, I've heard it from police. It is not true, it doesn't work. The only possible way that can happen is if you have your mobile phone and you put it into a satellite phone sleeve like the one from Thuraya. Otherwise there's no way it's going to connect. But here's what actually does happen. First, you can, off a mobile phone, dial 112 and it will connect you to the emergency services anywhere in the world. Now, unfortunately, the emergency services numbers are not standardised across the world. It's 000 in Australia, 911 in the USA, and it's 999 in the UK. Doesn't matter, just dial 112 and it will get you to the local emergency services. Now, with all mobile phones, you can make the emergency call to that 112 number without there being a SIM in there, and I don't suggest you try it because you don't want to make prank calls on it, but you can actually do that without a SIM. Then there's something called camp on. So let's say that you've got an Optus phone on this network and you need to make an emergency call, but there's no Optus signal. Well, the phone will actually connect to a Telstra signal if it has the ability to do so and make the call there. You can't make any other calls, but you can certainly make that emergency call there as well. So that's called camp on. Again, it won't reach for the satellites. And the third thing is there's something called AML, otherwise known as ELS, Emergency Location Service, and that's when you make a call off a mobile phone and you've got the location turned on with the GPS feature turned on, then the phone will automatically send an SMS message with your coordinates to the emergency services, and that's something which has been implemented right into the operating system of later mobile phones. Very, very useful as well. You should still also know where you are. If you're remote, you should have a good awareness of your lat long coordinates or UTM, whatever the case may be, but it's handy to have that feature as well. But please, your mobile phone will not connect to satellite, so do not be thinking you've got this microscopic little sat phone in your pocket. You don't. Okay, this is really basically how satellite systems work. We've got the Earth here, this diagram's not to scale. We've got a person, and then we've got a satellite phone. Then we've got some form of satellite flying above the Earth in space. That satellite phone communicates to and from the satellite. It's a bidirectional communication. And then we've got a base station over here. The satellite will then take that communication and send it to the base station, and the base station connects to the internet, the phone network, whatever you have. That is basically how all satellite systems work. Now, there's two main types. There's the geostationary type, and this is what I'm going to explain now. This Earth is drawn to scale. A geostationary satellite orbits around 35,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and it's called geostationary because it doesn't move relative to the Earth's surface. Now, because it's so far up, you can see that it can actually cover a large percentage of the Earth's surface using just one satellite. So you don't need many satellites if you have a geostationary system. Now, if you're also thinking, hang on, that's a long way for the signal to go all the way up here and all the way back there, you're right, and that is one of the major disadvantages of a geostationary, allied to the fact you only have 2 or 3 satellites when you run a geostationary system. Okay, now examples of geostationary satellite networks is Thuraya and Inmarsat. Now, we've also got LEO. LEO stands for low Earth orbit. If you can call 900 kilometers above the Earth's surface in the case of Iridium low, I guess it is relative to the 35,000. So this little blue triangle here is drawn to scale. You can see it's way lower than this massive 35,000 out here. And you're thinking, well, hang on, how can one satellite or 2 satellites possibly cover the entire Earth's surface? Yeah, you're on the right tracks. We'll come on to that. So that's an example of Iridium. Now, Starlink's also got an LEO system, but their satellites are even closer to the Earth's surface, only about 550 kilometers. And then Globalstar's also an older example of an LEO system as well. Now, out of interest, you might have heard about all these billionaires launching into space. Well, where does space stop and start? There's no fixed sort of definition in theory, but there has been an actual line saying, okay, if you cross this line, you are now officially in space, because as you go into space, the air gets thinner and thinner. Eventually it gives way to a vacuum, and that line is called the Kármán line, and it's deemed to be 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So even the Starlink stuff is well and truly into space. And for reference, an airliner cruises maybe at 35,000 feet, which is about 10 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So that's your geostationary. Now, with the geostationary, this is how you get Earth coverage. So again, this is to scale. There's the Earth, there's one. You can see see that with just 2 satellites you can actually manage to get quite a percentage of the Earth's surface covered, which is pretty good. And there's an example of a Thuraya map. So Thuraya have got 2 satellites called Thuraya 2 and 3. I don't know what happened to Thuraya 1, and that's their coverage area there. You tend to get very good coverage in the centre and generally around the middle. Once you start towards the edges, you can see here that the coverage starts to get a little bit patchy, and it being geostationary, it will never ever improve. One of the things about geostationary satellites is the coverage is exactly what it is. With the low Earth orbit, as we'll see in a moment, that starts to change because the satellites move relative to the Earth's surface, so you can come in and out of coverage. There's pros and cons of both approaches. Okay, so here's LEO, or low Earth orbit, how this works. So we've got lots of satellites flying around the world. Now we need many of them because each one is only a relatively short distance above the surface of the Earth. So we've got our person there again, make a phone call, sends data to whatever satellite is in view, that hands it off to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and it gets down to the base station here. So that's basically the way these things work. So your call gets handed off from satellite to satellite, as the satellites fly over, it will hand over your call from one satellite to the next one, because they're not stationary relative to the Earth's surface. Okay, now let's get into Starlink, how it works, which is a variation of LEO. In fact, it is a LEO, but some specifics there. So we've got our satellites flying around again, but this time we've got a base station here. Now this basically looks at the satellites, figures out where the satellites are, and it automatically orients itself using little electric motors to point at the relevant satellites as they go over. And again, we have data transferring around the satellites through to get to the base station, of which there's going to be many base stations. But what's really cool is they're going to use lasers to transfer data between the two or between the satellites up in space, and that's pretty awesome because the speed of light is actually faster by 47% in a vacuum than it is on a fibre optic cable. And then also, if you look at the curvature of the Earth, that's a longer distance in a straight line. So because these satellites are fairly low for satellite standards, only 550 kilometres up, and they're going to talk to each other by lasers, I mean, if that's not cool, I don't know what it is, then what we term latency, or the sort of time taken from data to get from here to here, is actually going to be pretty small. And even more so, a lot of the ground stations that they're going to be putting together, or the major stations there, they're going to be co-located with things like Google or Microsoft's data centers, so they're going to be able to plug right into the backbone of the internet. So if this sounds like it's all really going to be high-speed internet, well, you are right, but let me get onto that in a little bit, and we'll explain a bit more. Anyway, we've got our Starlink system here, and then that creates a Wi-Fi network. Now this Wi-Fi network you just use exactly as you would as if you were at home. There's literally no difference, right? So you've got your phone, your laptop, whatever else there, just connect to it exactly as you would any other Wi-Fi network, and that's it. You've got no real idea. All of this magic is happening here to give you your Facebook updating capability. Alright, now these satellites, a couple of cool points. They weigh 227 kilograms each. They're actually designed for minimal reflection. There's going to be a lot of them, and one of the concerns is that it's going to clutter up the night sky. So they are designed to sort of not reflect, and painted black, etc. So to minimise the sort of visual effect. They've got a 5-year life, and they're meant to just burn up into the atmosphere after that. But managing all of these satellites from different countries and organisations is actually becoming a bit of a problem now. Now, so far there are 1,700 satellites which have been launched, and there's going to be 42,000 of them ultimately. 42,000 Starlink satellites flying 550 kilometres around the world just for high-speed internet. So that's super cool. And why is this? Well, obviously satellite internet is a great thing, because it's a lot cheaper just to go and put a dish somewhere remote than it is to run a fibre optic cable or something like that. But what SpaceX, on Elon Musk's view, is that he's going to use the profits from the Starlink to try and colonise Mars. Well, you know, say what you like about Elon Musk, you cannot accuse the guy of thinking on a small scale. Alright, so here's some of the base stations in the USA. And you can see those circles is the distant sort of catchment area for each one, so to speak. Here's the same for Australia. Turned it off for the Australian ones. They're probably going to add more around here. There's a few in New Zealand already. And if you want to know what they look like, well, here is what they look like. Basically look like a bunch of eggs there. That's a Starlink ground station. Now, I got this from, don't know how to pronounce her name, Elania Sheriff's videos. So if you search for her on YouTube, she's got actually a really good channel where she talks a lot about Starlink, gives all the latest news updates. I've subscribed to it so I can learn about Starlink, and she's granted me permission to use this image, so thank you for that. This bit is actually kind of mind-blowing. So I did a speed test on my GSM mobile phone on an Australian Telstra network, and you can just download the speed test app and run this yourself. 23.5 megabits per second, and then I did the same on my wired connection at home, part of the national broadband network we have in Australia, so that's just a wired connection. 38.7. Australia does not lead the world in fast internet speeds. I won't rant about why that's the case, it just is an unfortunate fact. So then Marcus Tuck, who we'll talk to a bit later on, decided to do a speed test on his NBM system, which he's got somewhere set up in the wilds of Canada at the moment, and 220. So that's pretty awesome. So I decided to plot all of this on a graph. And what I found was there's the 23, there's the 38, there's Starlink. So you can see just how incredibly quick this is. Now, a lot of people in different places other than me get a lot quicker speed, 38.7 on their home internet connection, but by any means 220 off a satellite system is just extraordinary. Because take a look at this. Here's Iridium. Now that actually is plotted. It's so tiny you can't really see it, but I have plotted it there, and that's just the relative scale. That's like that speed is 1/9000th of my mobile phone GSM speed. Thuraya is a little bit better. You know, it's a lot better than Iridium, but again, it's just a tiny fraction. And the quickest out of the current satellite systems is Inmarsat, and again, it just doesn't really compare. So the problem we've got is that internet speeds have just got quicker and quicker, and the internet itself has adapted to that because web pages are now richer and hungrier for data than they ever were before. So you could have got away with this sort of speed maybe 20 years ago and just done some basic stuff. Now you've just got absolutely no hope, which is why you really need something like Starlink. And these older systems were really designed for voice with data sort of tacked onto it, whereas Starlink isn't designed for voice at all. It's pure data, and that's why it's so good. It's actually really incredible just to consider you could set up something like this anywhere in the world and get that sort of speed. Now, this is as of, 16th of July, so Starlink's just been granted some more ACMA approval, so we can expect to have them operational pretty shortly. And in fact, I've bought Starlink, so this is what happens when you sign up. It also tells you the costs in Australia, so the costs are static all the way worldwide. It's $99 US, which per month, which translates into 139 Australian dollars for me, and to buy the hardware that's $709. Then they're going to charge me $100 shipping and handling, so I've signed up to that already. And then you get a confirmatory email which tells you what you're going to get and your service address, etc. Let's now hear from Marcus Tuck. He's been on a few of my webinars, a very clever guy. He's been travelling the world for 7 years in this Iveco Daily 4x4. He is an early adopter, he's highly technologically literate, and he's going to tell us all about his experience with Starlink, and we're going to take quite a number of detailed questions from the readers.
Well, I think the first thing to say is it's actually a really easy system to use. Normally, when you're talking about satellites and satellite dishes, you have to align the dish incredibly accurately because it's trying to talk to a geostationary satellite 35,000 kilometers away, and you make a 1 degree error in where you point your antenna and your beam is moved 160 kilometers away from the satellite. So aligning those are difficult. With Starlink, they've just done an amazing job. You can see the satellite there in front of my truck. Basically, you take it out of the box, you stand it in that tripod, switch everything on, and just sit back and watch it. The first thing that'll happen is that dish will go to completely flat. It will look straight up in the sky, all on its own. It will work out where the satellites are. It will then turn itself and point in the optimum direction for satellite reception. So there's no configuration that you need to do. It literally is just switch the thing on and wait for the Wi-Fi cloud to arrive, and you get super fast data. The other advantage that means is being on the RV, I mean, I normally fit it on the roof of the truck. I've got a mounting up there. And if the truck is rocking while we walk around inside the vehicle, so it's a 4x4, it's got quite soft suspension, it's not a problem. The satellite dish compensates for that, and it allows for movement within the vehicle. It's not designed for a vehicle being in motion though. So at the moment, it's been developed for use on houses. So it's designed that you install it on your chimney of your house or put it in your garden, set it all up, and that's your internet. Being a traveler and being quite geeky, I like to kind of mess around with things. I decided, well, what's the chances of being able to use this while we're actually traveling? So what we can do with the Starlink is you have a registered address, and the system is designed to work at that registered address. So basically, there are cells all over the world, and the Starlink system beams service to a cell. And when you sign up for a cell, and you get data within that cell. Now, obviously, when you travel, you want to go from one cell to another. The system does allow you to change your registered address. And so what I've done over the last 4 months is I've been changing my registered address, and therefore I've been hopping around the country, which is not really what it's intended to do. I've changed the address 41 times so far, and I've camped it over 100 locations. And I'm now 2,000 kilometers away from where I started. So it's working in a semi-mobile fashion at the moment. In development, they do have a mobile system. They are looking at it for mobile applications, and that will be perfect for the RV community down the line. I don't know what the timeline is on that. They're also installing it on aircraft, and they've also installed it on one of their Starship prototypes and blasted it up to 30,000 feet, or sorry, 30 kilometers at the moment. And it will be going into orbit fairly shortly as well to provide telemetry on a rocket. So it has the capability to handle a moving vehicle, but that technology hasn't been released to end users yet. For us, we live in the truck. We've lived in the truck for 7.5 years now, traveling around the world. And for us, we've always battled to try and get data occasionally. You know, you arrive, you spend all day sat in the vehicle chatting to each other, you know, great. And suddenly you find an internet cafe, you sit down in the cafe, and you're these sad couple that never talk to each other because you're there in front of your phone because it's like, oh, we've got data, we can see what's happened in the world. And you spend kind of an hour sat over a coffee, not talking to each other, looking at a phone, and everybody thinks you're a really sad couple, when the reality is you've just spent 6 hours in the vehicle doing nothing but talk to each other.
Yeah.
So the novelty now of actually having not just an internet connection, but a really fast internet connection, it really is transformed. You know, in the past we were, okay, we'll go onto iTunes when we can find a Wi-Fi somewhere, we'll download a TV program. Now we can just stream live TV. You know, I mean, data is phenomenal. The slight limitation we have at the moment, though, is not because it's still in beta and it's still being rolled out. Not all the cells are activated, so you can't use it everywhere. And Starlink and SpaceX, they aren't pushing out a map of which areas are active or not. So you have to play around a bit to try and work out where you can use it at the moment. So what I do is I look at our route where we're going to go for the next day or so, and then I try and place an order for a Starlink in some of the locations we might want to go to. And if it accepts a full order, then you know that cell is active, and that's somewhere I can move my address to. If I can't place a full order, I know the cell isn't active, so therefore I've got to look for somewhere else. And that's kind of how we do it. And some days we can't find anywhere near where we want to camp where we can get a signal, so we don't have Starlink that night. And then maybe the following day at lunchtime, we know there's going to be somewhere, so we'll move the address there. At lunchtime, we'll put the aerial up. We'll use a bit of internet, do what we want to do, pack up, and then drive on to another location. So it's not perfect at the moment, but when you do find an active cell and you set it up, the speeds are phenomenal. We've seen speeds up to, personally, we've seen speeds up to about 260 megabits per second download, and upload speeds of up to 50 megabits per second, which is just phenomenal. Others have reported higher speeds than that. I'd say our average is around the 200 mark, 200 megabits per second down, and about 20 up.
Okay. I'm interested to see from the participants, who here has home internet as fast as 200 megabits per second? And if you want to know, go to speedtest.net and run that, and then type it into the chat. I'm just interested to see what you guys are going to come up with. Sorry, Marcus, go on.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, where was I? we're trying to move between these cells. One of the limitations with the cells is they're relatively small, but we found that you can actually push the limits of the cell. If I can find an active address somewhere, my general rule is it will work out to about 20 kilometers from that address. I have on occasion got service out to about 35 kilometers, but that's really pushing it. But generally, if you're within the 20 kilometers of a registered address, then the system works quite well.
Okay. Okay, so 20 Ks, yeah. All right. So let's run through some questions then. So the first one is, I would love to see it useful on yachts at sea. Do you think that will be possible?
Yeah, definitely. SpaceX have already got it fitted on their drone ships, which they're doing their Falcon 9 first stage recoveries on. They put 2 Starlinks on those, and it does work at sea. So it's coming. One of the limitations at the moment is the inter-satellite lasers are only on the polar orbit one. There's only 13 of those airborne at the moment. So at the moment you are tied to a ground station. So you need to be in view of a satellite, which is also in view of a ground station, which means I'm not sure exactly how far out that is, but I mean, it's a reasonable distance. We've gone to 54 degrees north latitude in Canada, and we've had really good Starlink. And the area we're in, there are no ground stations. All the ground stations are in the USA, not Canada, in that region. So they're south of 49. So you're looking at about 5 degrees of latitude there between the ground station and our position. It works really well. So at the moment, you're tied to these ground stations. But as you said, the new versions of satellites are getting launched probably in the next couple of months. They're going to start launching those, and they will have the satellite. And then you'll be able to use it out in the middle of the ocean because it will relay the data satellite to satellite. And actually, if you wanted to connect from Canada to Australia, it will be the fastest link, because as you said, the laser beam is faster through the sky, through space, than it is through the ground network. And also because it would be going line of sight, it'll actually be a shorter path as well, rather than using the sub-oceanic cables.
Oh, actually, that's true. Yeah, be absolutely a shorter path. And for those of you that know things about great circles as well, that would actually be just sort of a direct line of sight there as well, which is interesting. Yeah, yeah. She mentioned that the original target, I think, for launching all the satellites was going to, or sorry, worldwide coverage rather, was September. But Elon Musk was at a conference and just said it's actually going to be August, and that's not all 42,000 satellites. There's only 1,700 of 42,000, but they're looking at worldwide coverage next month, basically. And then they're just going to keep on pushing more and more satellites up. So imagine how good it will be when there's 42,000, there's only 1,700 at the moment. Okay, so next question. I hear, Tony Jambo, I hear there are frequent intermittent dropouts. What is your experience, Marcus?
For us, we haven't had that. And the reason why is because we're at quite a high latitude. So the satellites at the moment are on an orbit of about 53 degrees, which means they basically go from 53 degrees north to 53 degrees south, and then back up to 53 degrees north again. And as a result, the shape of the orbit means that lots of the different orbital planes are all crossing over each other at this high latitude around the 50-degree north mark. So we've got spectacular satellite coverage here, and the same in New Zealand as well, because they're obviously on the opposite side. If you were at the lower states, or maybe northern Australia, for example, you would have gaps because the constellation isn't fully deployed yet. And that's, I think, what he's getting to in Elon's talking about in the end of August. The initial 53-degree shell will be fully deployed. And then that should give you coverage from about 57 north to about 57 south. And then you shouldn't get the gaps. But as I say, at the latitude we're at, we've got an abundance of satellites. We've got probably more satellites than you're going to get for several years if you're at an equatorial location. So we've had fantastic coverage.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm just going to share my screen again so you guys can actually see exactly where the satellites are. So this is a map, well, this is the world, and these are the satellites at the moment. Now the red is basically darkness, and that's the world there. I'll just zoom out a bit and let's find somewhere looking a bit more familiar. America, go out a bit. So yeah, you can get to see kind of what the world looks like there, and get an idea of you know, exactly what that coverage looks like. You know,
if you hold it there a second, you can see that if you look around the kind of, you're looking at the North Pole there.
Yeah.
If you look around the equator area, you can see there's fairly reasonable coverage between all the rings are joining up. But then if you look at the north and the south, you can see where all the satellites are kind of bunching up at the north and the south, and that's just orbital mechanics of how the satellites are actually working, and that's why at the moment in Canada we're getting such good coverage.
Yeah. Now you can see here that all of those circles, they're not all completely overlapping. There's actually gaps between them. So there's a lot of those circles, but there's gaps. And that's why they need more than the 1,700 satellites you can see here at the moment. So you can, if I go in on Australia, okay, so there's Australia. This is a live view of all the satellites tracking at the moment. Now I've set my location down here, as you can see. So that's me, and so in Victoria and Melbourne, I'm currently in range of quite a few of them, so I'd actually have coverage if I had Starlink there. But over here, I wouldn't be. There's a gap, and there's another tiny little gap here, etc. So the coverage isn't complete yet. So if you know where to look in the sky, you'll be able to see the Starlink satellites actually operating, and you can see that polar areas also, and the poles respectively not that well covered at the moment, but that's okay. I'm not planning on driving my four-wheel drive to Antarctica just for the moment. Okay, next question. Do you have to have a subscription?
Yes, you do. The basic, I'll do it in US dollars. The basic kit is $499 US plus whatever the taxes are in your country, and also the shipping costs. And then the monthly subscription is $99 a month plus whatever your taxes are, and that is unlimited data. There are no 75 Canadian dollars a month, and I'm capped at 6 gigabytes of data, whereas I get Starlink for 144 Canadian dollars, and I've got unlimited data. So okay. Yeah, it's good.
Good stuff. Now, I think that, so the cost of the system now, I believe that the cost of the system is the same worldwide, which is that $99 US, and it's $500 for the dish, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think that the dish costs them about $1,000 to make, so they're actually loss leading the dish. But as more and more users come on, then you can expect costs to drop. But you know, for that sort of $99 a month US is not crazy. I mean, if you look at this, could replace your home broadband and your satellite connection. So if you look at both of those, it's actually pretty good value already. I would suggest, yeah. Okay, next question. What is with the upload being so slow? And how? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, sorry, I think that's quite common. If you look at any internet provider, you'll always find your upload speed is slower than your download speed. And I think it's to do with prioritizing the bandwidth. I mean, generally people are trying to stream down videos and trying to watch content from the internet. It's not so common for people to be trying to upload data. To give you an idea, I mean, when we first got the system, we had a fairly bad connection because we were about 30 kilometers away from the cell, and we were testing it, and on the speed test we were getting about 50 megabits per second. We were both able to stream 1K HD video on our different devices plus emails seamlessly at that speed, and that's 50 megabits per second. You know, we're regularly getting over 200. So and even with a 20 megabyte per second upload, unless you're deliberately trying to upload large video files or something like that, then maybe you might want a slightly faster connection, but I'd be very surprised. I mean, I'm obviously doing this video chat now through Starlink, and you can see the video and the chat we're doing is seamless. We're not getting any dropouts at all.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus is right. I mean, all internet systems are designed so that to prioritize download over upload, because that's typically what you spend more time doing. Yeah, it will work out fine. As you can see, it's not really been a problem. Now, next question is, so costings for internet in Australia, yeah, that'll be $99 US for the moment. How big is the dish physically? And I'm going to add on to that, does it have a carry case or anything?
It doesn't come with a carry case. It just has, it just comes in its delivery box. It's very well packaged and everything for delivery. The actual dish is 589 millimeters across is the diameter, so just under 2 feet. And the whole system weighs about 9 kilograms. So what I've actually done, I'll see if I can bring up an image. I've got a picture on my website, but just a second.
Okay, question from Richard. Is it likely the dish would get smaller? I would suggest yes. I mean, look, this is technology in its infancy, right? So it's going to get smaller, cheaper, lighter, better. So yeah, and as Marcus mentioned earlier on, they are looking at sort of human portable ones as well. Mad Max, so I can access it in Australia. Yes, if you signed up for the beta and you've got what you need to. So yeah, if you're out in rural areas, you might well forget about the NBN and just use Starlink. And actually, Starlink is kind of designed for not really for our use case as four-wheel drivers. It's actually more designed to bring internet access to places which don't have it, and it's cheaper just to put Starlink in. You know, just here's your dish go than it is to run a fiber optic network or a 5G network out there. Marcus,
yeah, let's see if I've got on here. What I've actually done is I've actually fitted the dish. That's the dish in the stowed position. This is my table inside the RV. So I've put some felt on the underside of the table, and then it's just basically like a spare wheel tie-down strap, a three-legged tie-down strap I've got going around.
I think you may have opened that in a different window, and we can't see the window that you're, because we can see a bunch of photographs at the moment, but not okay. Photographs. So just stop share and reshare again.
Okay. Yeah, is that better?
That's it. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So you can see that's it underneath the table.
Okay.
Because it fits really nicely on the underside of the table there, so we can sit there when we're not using it. It doesn't get in our way. Right. And I've got a mount on the roof, so I just open the roof hatch, put it through the roof hatch, and put an electrical connector on the roof. It's a Cat5 cable, so you can get waterproof Cat5 cables. And I've basically installed it into the RV to minimise. It must take me about, I would say, from the vehicle stopping to me having high-speed internet is under 5 minutes. Okay,
that's pretty good. Yeah, yeah. Look, that's not too big to take on a four-wheel drive trip, but it is too big to be really convenient. So that, but again, that's likely to get smaller. Okay, any idea why when it might be available in Europe? Well, now is the answer. Yeah, it's just
certainly available in the UK, Germany, France. I think it's going into Austria. It'll be the northern countries first, and then it will progress south as more satellites get launched.
Okay. Would speeds drop as more users are added? Well, look, yes, if you get a lot of people on any network, it will get congested. But I think that the amount of satellites they're going to have here and the volumes are really going to solve that problem. And, you know, again, Marcus was saying earlier that they're going to co-locate Starlink base stations with Google, and I also heard Azure, that's Microsoft's sort of cloud systems, with their data centers. So that means that the Starlink systems will be plumbed directly into the high-speed backbone of the internet. So I don't think that slowing down because of more users is going to be a problem in the foreseeable future. And it should be scalable. Just keep on adding more satellites until you can't see the sun, basically, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that's the idea of the more satellites give more bandwidth. But Elon's always said it won't compete with high-speed fiber. It's not designed for the middle of Sydney, you know, where you should, in theory, have decent fiber to your home. It is designed for the remote communities. He's not trying to compete with internet provided to large conurbations. It is really designed for remote locations.
All right. Can I use it to phone home? Yeah, well, probably, yeah. Could you have it permanently mounted on your roof? Now, if that means as you drive around, interesting question. I guess you probably could. It's weatherproof, isn't it?
It is weatherproof. I have driven at 80 kilometers an hour with it on the roof by accident. You know, you pack up and you forget to take the dish down. It is reasonably robust. I wouldn't plan on doing it for any length of time, though. I think the mobile system, they are working on a system specifically for vehicles, and then that will obviously be designed for use in motion. So you will have internet while you're driving through the system. So there will be some changes. I suspect the dish won't be a moving dish. I'd imagine it'd be like they have on the aircraft and what they've done on the Starship, and it will just be fitted flat on the roof of the vehicle, and it will do. The other thing is it's beam steers, and one of the huge differences between this and a normal dish, they refer to it as a dish. It's not a dish at all. It's a phase array. Being an ex-radar technician, I can go into a lot of geeky detail on this, but basically there's over 1,400 antennas on the front of that dish, and it can switch them all individually and control each one of those cells individually.
Wow.
And it allows it to steer the beam electronically. Now, what that means is there's no movement of the dish when it's tracking a satellite. And as the satellite's traveling at about 22,000 kilometers an hour over you, and it goes from one side of the horizon to the other in about 110 seconds. Well, this satellite dish, it tracks that satellite as it flies overhead, and then it instantly flicks to the next satellite. And that's the really clever thing with this dish. So in theory, I mean, when the dish moves, it's just optimizing its position because there aren't that many satellites at the moment. But eventually, when there are a lot more satellites in the sky, it won't have to do this orientation slightly to one direction. It will just be able to look straight up and pick up all the satellites as they fly around, because it'll electronically beam steer to wherever the satellites are. And that's how clever the technology is. It really is a step change from anything that's come before it.
Yeah, it is, because Iridium didn't really have that, but that's actually not too dissimilar from how mobile phones work, picking up different cell towers. Yeah. Will the system provide Australian free-to-air TV? It won't, but it might provide the backbone for it, because this will just be, think of it as the NBN, but via satellites, not the NBN, but think of it conceptually like that. Now, what services you run on top of it? Well, I don't think Elon Musk or Starlink has got any real interest in that. But yeah, it could absolutely be the case that you could run TV channels over this. There would be the bandwidth to do that, but that would not be a SpaceX thing. That would be whatever entities want to broadcast over it. And in the same way, this is not a phone network, but you can make phone calls via Skype, remember Skype, or Zoom, or whatever else you want. And so you could make I guess a voice call over if it's not a phone call in the same way that we will be used to. I mean, there's no difference in as much that you could dial someone's number and then speak to them, but the technology underneath is different there. Next question, is it line of sight? Will it work in a forest?
It is line of sight with the satellites, and it is, when you see a lot of people on Reddit and various other forums, they do complain a lot about obstructions, and these tend to be gamers that the slightest dropout will cause them a problem. Now, when I first got the system and I started trying it, it was very prone to dropouts and issues if there was anything in its field of view. The system wasn't very intelligent back then. I've only had it for 4 months, and I'm on software version 15 already. That this isn't like your satellite phone where you might get a software update once every 15, 18 months. We're getting software updates for this system every week or 2 weeks. They are really developing it fast. One of the big changes they made is how it dynamically changes between satellites. Originally, you were allocated a satellite and you followed it from horizon to horizon. When it got to the other horizon, it looked for the next satellite. And if there was any obstructions during that transit of the satellite, you lost signals during that obstruction period. The system now is incredibly fast switching, and if you're in an area with obstructions, it jumps to the next satellite, even though the other one is still above the horizon because there's an obstruction there. And I've seen a massive increase in performance. I'll see if I can do a screen share again, because I've actually got some screenshots of what I can hopefully try and explain it a little bit better. I was parked doing some work on the vehicle, and I was parked in this clearing here. A friend let me. I had to do some work on my transfer gearbox, so I was going to be parked up for a few days. So he let me use his little lean-to shed there, and you can see I'm surrounded by sort of 40, 50 foot high pine trees there. You can see the dish in the foreground, and in theory that shouldn't work. I should not get a signal. We had quite a lot of obstructions because of those trees, but actually for streaming video, no problem at all. Checking emails, absolutely no problem at all. If you wanted to game, yeah, you're going to get interruptions and breaks. But what you find is the internet is so fast that when you're watching a video, the buffering between the breaks is so good that it becomes seamless. So yeah, a video call there might have been a little bit choppy, but actually it worked really, really well. I'll just see if I can bring up another shot I've got. Has that come up, or
No,
still on the old? Okay, let me stop and share again. Just share a new one. you get obstruction data coming up in the app. This is the app showing you the obstruction data. So in the center is directly above you, and then you can see you've got the cardinal points around the outside, and you can see the red. This is the screenshot from that location where I was parked in the woods, and you can clearly see the outline of the trees in the sky. So the satellite was trying to just use that little bit of light gray area of sky in the middle. And as you can see there, we were getting an interruption every 58 seconds from their own data. But yeah, for gaming, that wouldn't have been usable. Maybe for a video call, it would have been difficult. But actually, for what most people are on the internet for checking emails, surfing the internet, or streaming video, it was actually fine.
Yeah, and we've got to remember again, 1,700 satellites up, we're going to get to 42,000, and the coverage will just be so much better at that point. Yeah. Next question, what's the best guess as to when a mobile system might be available? I don't know on that. I just know that I suspect they're probably designing it. I just don't know when it's going to be commercially available. Any ideas, Marcus?
There's been some FCC listings. They're trialing mobile systems at the moment around Hawthorne and also around Seattle. I think they've got a factory up there. So it is being tested at the moment. They're also done trial installations on some airliners on a 737, and I think it might be an Airbus 320, I'm not sure. And as I say, they've got it on their Starship. They've also done flight trials with the US Air Force, where they've been downloading gigabits per second into the cockpit, which is just crazy. So they are working on it. How long it takes them to go from the prototype to production, I don't know. I think part of the delay in the rollout at the moment is I think they're probably suffering from a chip shortage, as everybody is. And I think really the reason why there's a bit of a slow rollout at the moment, or slower than people would like, is probably because they're having trouble with manufacturing because they just can't get the parts.
Okay. Do we know when the full satellite rollout will be complete? I don't recall seeing that date.
No, I've not seen that either. We're waiting now. Hopefully the end of this month, early next month, they'll start doing the polar orbits. So we're starting 70-degree and 97-degree orbit satellites getting launched. They're going to be launching both from Florida and from Vandenberg in California. So hopefully there'll be quite a. I mean, last month they were launching 60 satellites every 8 or 9 days. That's the kind of tempo they've been throwing these things up. So it is pretty fast.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably going to be sort of 2 or 3 years, but it's not going to be like usable all of a sudden at 2 or 3 years. Every satellite that goes up just gets rid of some of those gaps I showed you guys, so it just gets better and better. Do you have issues accessing country-specific services such as Netflix, geo-blocking basically?
No, it knows where you are, and so my system is registered as Canadian, and so even though I'm using an American ground station, it shows as Canadian, so I get all the Canadian services. There have been some glitches with the software occasionally, and you do see it come up on some of the forums that, oh, my system now thinks I'm in America and the Canadians can't watch their Canadian TV. I think that's just a slight software issue while they're doing their development work. Generally, no, it knows which country you're in, and so you get the services associated with that country.
Okay. And how quick and easy is it to change your service address when you're traveling?
It's very quick. You log into your account, you go to your profile, you can then click on changing your registered address, and the quickest way I find is you click on the map, you zoom out on the map, you scan it across to where you want to go, you zoom in on your map, and you submit, and then you update. And then it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for that to actually take effect, and it's then working at the new address. The issue at the moment is finding the active cells to do that too. That can take a little while of searching, but the actual process of physically changing the address in the system, it probably takes less than 2 minutes.
Okay, good stuff. All right, now, so that's the end of the questions. You can ask more. I'm now going to bring Dave Darmody in here. He's been patiently waiting. Thanks, Dave. So, Dave, if you just want to briefly introduce yourself and your experience with remote communications, and then give us your reaction to what you've heard so far, maybe some of the pros and the cons.
Yeah, sure. So, Dave, I run Australian Offroad Academy. Clearly, we spend most of our time, or as much of our time as we can, in the more remote kind of locations, which, let's face it, is where everyone wants to be. That said, compared to 17 years ago when I started this business, we're not in, we're in mobile coverage now a lot more than we used to be that through using things like Selfie Go, which of course is incredible, or just the fact that there is just now so much more of even the interesting places that actually have reliable cellular coverage, which of course is cheap and great. Interesting, I just actually, while you've been chatting, I've actually gone online to Starlink to see what's involved in signing up. And where I live in Harvey Bay, I've been told it will be available in my area in mid to late 2021, and I can sign up and pay a deposit right now. So there you go. That's interesting. So clearly we are past mid 2021, but we'll see. Yeah, look, interesting. I guess the discussion there around it being utilised in the Air Force, I guess in much the same way as we saw with Iridium a few years ago, it really was military applications that kind of saw things get small and saw things get lighter and I guess more robust. So I dare say that we four-wheel drivers will be probably, we can't all carry 600 millimeter dishes around the place. I dare say that it'll be until that generation of development happens either towards military or towards remote area exploration, perhaps. Maybe it will be mining industry or resources sector that actually drives some of this development, which fair enough. But I dare say we four-wheel drivers as recreational users may actually operate off the back of that kind of development, and that will be pretty cool. So yeah, interesting times. I did share, Robert, your not sure if you used the word disgust, but the distastefulness of being constantly connected. Yeah, get it. I got to say, the idea of a phone not ringing is actually kind of cool sometimes, but it's also nice to know you do have some mechanism for calling in the troops, which, to be honest, we already have. We do have the PLBs, or I've got a Garmin Montana sitting there, or once upon a time we used spots or various other things. I don't need to be able to talk to someone, but if things go very badly, I can push a button and people who know more about helping people out than I do can arrive fast. So yeah, interesting times ahead. I think the Grey Nomad free camps might look very different in not too distant a future. So let's see.
Yeah. So if you're a four-wheel driver looking at remote comms, which would you buy? And I've just put a poll up there for Satphone, a messenger system, distress beacon, or Starlink. Which of those would you advise people if they're going to go on a, let's say, a big lap or do remote touring, or which combination of them and why?
All right. Well, look, right now it's not Starlink. We're not there yet.
Assuming Starlink, what was available?
Well, okay. Based on the Starlink system that we have now of a 600 millimeter dish, it obviously needs to be powered, and will be, let's be honest, less than useful after an accident. Okay, that's not going to be something that if you've put your RV, I'm not going to use the word RV again. I'm sorry. If you put your rig or whatever on its side, then it's not going to be something you can call in particularly much help for, because it's likely to be inaccessible or broken. In much the same way that we pretty much stopped using HF radios. The same idea, rolling this in patrol with the big HF auto tune on the back, and it's pretty much gone. Right now, it's satellite phones. Okay, if we're actually talking about communication, then it's a sat phone. My little Montana is awesome for sending text messages to people, but it's not really it's not really something I can use to run my business when I'm in remote areas. It's not really something that I can use to maintain contact in a bigger sense. So we do have the PLBs, we do have the in-between, I suppose, with the Montanas and the other Garmin InReach kind of products. But yeah, I think of those lists right now, and based on the practical size that we currently see as Starlink, then we're in satellite phone territory, whether that be an Iridium, which is point and shoot and oh so simple, or whether that be something like a Thuraya Sat Hub, where you utilize your standard phone. So the one I had, Robert, you had an image there before of a slide in a cradle for the Thuraya. That's cool. That's out there too. I use the Wi-Fi Sat Hub, so I can actually have the satellite component set up in the car permanently with the rooftop aerial, and then I communicate to the satellite component through Wi-Fi from my phone. So I can actually have the car positioned out in open space and still, theoretically be in a sheltered position when I'm using the phone, which is handy. So yeah, of the list, my recommendation to people would be, if they want comms and want to be able to conduct their business as well as just call in the troops, it's a sat phone. If they actually want some peace and quiet, and if they just want something on their belt to call in help if they need it, then it's going to be PLB or InReach.
Yep, makes sense.
I agree with Dave on that. I do carry a sat phone, and I don't see Starlink as being a replacement for that. If my rig caught fire, or we rolled, or we had an emergency somewhere, then I've got a go bag and I've got a sat phone in it, and I can grab that, get out of the vehicle very quickly, and then survive in that situation. I think Starlink isn't there yet. Whether Starlink actually develop a phone, I don't know whether that's on their agenda. But at the moment, I think for remote travel, it's great to have internet, if you especially if you're trying to work while you're on the road. But yeah, for an emergency situation, I don't think you can beat the Satphone or beacon at the moment.
A question from Christopher Leonard. I use InReach, which is two-way SMS text. Are there any other two-way messaging devices? I think you just answered that, Dave.
Yeah, so the Spot, I think version 4, which you had a picture of there, that is a two-way. So the Garmin Montana I'm using is just an InReach. It's the same philosophy, I suppose, just I guess as a bit more of a multi-purpose device. Off the top of my head, I can't recall, but I'm sure there is another. I'm sure there is another service out there which does provide that two-way messaging. I may be thinking of the Zolio that you had a photo of there.
That too.
Yeah, it's certainly in branding. I have a feeling there is another handheld device which does allow two-way messaging, but it's not one that I've seen in the wild, or even seen in the store for that matter.
Okay, great. All right. Any other final comments from yourself, Marcus, that we haven't covered that people might need to know?
On the distress side of things, I've got an Inmarsat which also has the distress button, but you need to program it up. And basically, you can sign up for a service with Geos, which is who Spot use, and they're basically a rescue coordination center, effectively. And you give them your phone details, the email number, etc. And then when you press that emergency button, it does work. It'll go through, and you pay the subscription service with them. They will then coordinate a rescue for you. We were living in the Middle East. We had Thuraya phones there, and we came across a road accident in the middle of the desert in Oman. Basically, two guys traveling in the back of a bakkie. The bakkie overtook us doing, it must have been 140 kilometers an hour plus on the dirt road, and then we saw a massive, what looked like a mortar round going off, and basically the guy had rolled the Land Cruiser. The two passengers in the back had got thrown out. We came across the scene. One of the guys had his head stoved in. He kind of got a brain hanging out, kind of thing. Julie got hold of the Thuraya sat and just dialed 999. And that went through to the Omani emergency services, which very helpfully did a recorded message saying there are no emergency services in your area. So, sat phones can be useful, but you need to have a backup plan for travel. It isn't the international rescue. Some people think you're not necessarily going to have a helicopter coming over your head in remote travel in all locations around the world. So you've got to be a little bit sensible about what you do and where you go.
Exactly. And the Spot network's powered by the Global Star network, which is one of the geostationaries. And I think that's a really good point. Just because you do have access to a satellite communication system doesn't mean to say you can take insane risks and not be self-sufficient. So really good point there. Now, this technology simultaneously excites me and appalls me, because I think it's amazing that we're just going to be able to have high-speed internet anywhere we want. That's going to be incredible for rural communities. Maybe we can reverse the amount of people who are living in the city and move some of them out to rural areas there for safety. It's great. There's just so many amazing possibilities. It's just really, really cool stuff. On the other hand, I think we're losing something. So here is a picture of the Simpson Desert. Took it about 3 years ago, and this tiny little dot in the middle of the clay pan there is a friend of mine. So the story is this: we were going to break camp. We're going to move off at about 7. This guy got up at about 4 or 5 or something like that, and he didn't break camp with us, and he just went for a walk down the QAA line, and said, I'll just pick you up along the way, and that was fine. So he did that, and he was completely and utterly alone. Now, where he is at the moment, to get to the nearest civilization is probably 2 solid days' drive, and we're completely out of mobile phone range. I mean, totally and utterly. And that's beautiful, because there's something about being out of mobile phone range which is different to just switching off your phone. It's really refreshing and invigorating, and it's just a great mental health thing to do. You just talk to people and we connect with people. You just feel so different, and it's an amazing experience. But if we've got Starlink everywhere and mobile phone coverage everywhere, we're going to lose that. There's going to be nowhere in the world you cannot have internet access. And I just wonder what effect that's going to have on our psyche, our health, and everything else there. So I want to do this sort of thing whilst you still can, because I think it's important just to experience a disconnect from technology, even though technology has so much to offer us. So let's run through pros and cons of the different communication options. Now we've had a look at Starlink. So with the sat phones, they're really good at phone calls. That's literally what they do. You can text with them as well, not as easily as you can with a smartphone, but you can certainly get text messages out there. They're fairly easy to use. That said, do not assume you can give a sat phone to someone who's used to a smartphone and then have them use it. They probably won't be able to. I've tried this at a few different campsites, and it just doesn't really work. You need to know how to set the phone up, orient the antenna, and a few other things there. On the downside, there's no to very limited data capabilities. They're expensive to buy. You need a monthly plan, so it's not a cheap option. But you know, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you've got a problem, suddenly they start to look very, very cheap indeed. But they are robust and small and easy to use. Then we've got a distress beacon. These are even cheaper, simpler, smaller and lighter, and there is no ongoing monthly plan, which is good, and they connect you to the COSPAS SARSAT. You activate one of those, someone will find you eventually, that's for sure. But they're single function only. There's no nuance, right? You've got to be close to dying or not. There's nothing in between. You can't ask for advice. So great, but somewhat limited. Now your messages, yeah, you can text with them, you can do tracking. That's great. They're pretty easy. You know, multifunction devices, also navigation. So you've got communications there, which is good. Disadvantage is there's no voice, there's no data other than the texting, and you do need a plan with them as well. And in the sat phone hotspots, you can phone with them, and there's some limited data, but they're cheaper than sat phones generally, but really slow data. Again, you need an ongoing plan for them as well. And it's also not as easy to set up. With a sat phone, you switch it on and you make a call, and that's it. Here, you've got to switch that on. You've got to connect your smartphone to it. There's a bit more faffing around, and there's two devices to break and Bluetooth connection, Wi-Fi, etc. So it's a bit more complicated. And then for Starlink, well, the major advantage of Starlink is that super high speed internet. I mean, even better than the internet connection I'm using in my house at the moment. The disadvantage is it's pretty bulky. It's not something you can necessarily easily put inside of your vehicle at this point, and it's not really portable. Fairly high current draw, that'll probably come down as well. And it's not really something, if you roll your vehicle or it's on fire, probably your Starlink's going to go up with it as well. Whereas you can almost certainly salvage your sat phone or your message quickly, just grab that and run, certainly your PLB and to some extent your smartphone hotspot as well. So all of these have got pros and cons. In your use cases, obviously going to vary depending on your situation, your time, your money, your budget, your risk, who you're traveling with and everything else like that. I would, however, suggest a good option would be a sat phone plus Starlink, because with a sat phone you can do your texting, you can call. It's a really good thing to have in the event of emergency, because you've got your text and voice at the same time, but it doesn't have high-speed internet data, and that's where Starlink comes into its own there. So I hope you found this video useful. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, and appreciate all your support.